in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Insala's webinar titled The Secret Sauce to Mentoring in 2015. This is the latest in a series of complimentary webinars where we explore the many ways that mentoring can be a part of and benefit to your talent development strategy. If you've attended one of our previous webinars, welcome back. If this is your first time with us, we're very happy to have you, and we hope that everyone finds today's topic helpful and informative. I'm Blake McDaniel from Insala's Dallas office, facilitating this webinar with our seasoned mentoring expert and consultant, Judy Corner. Judy is the Director of Mentoring Solutions at Insala. Over the past 23 years, Judy's designed and delivered mentoring workshops, mentor and mentee training, and mentoring programs that she successfully implemented at a wide range of organizations. Today, Judy is going to share some insights on what it takes to create and support a successful mentoring program at your organization. We'll have about 30 minutes of presentation, followed by about 10 minutes of questions and answers, where Judy will respond directly to the questions you send in. But before we move on, I'd like to cover some of the guidelines for today's webinar. Attendees will be muted during the presentation for optimal audio performance, and we encourage you to ask questions throughout the discussion by typing them in the questions window at the lower portion of the GoToMeeting toolbar. We'll get to as many questions as we can during the time allotted. For any other information and continued discussion about mentoring programs, you can follow our LinkedIn company page and join our LinkedIn group at the Mentoring Thought Leaders Club, which we now have 790 members in participation. Also, be sure to visit our blog at blog.insala.com. We're very pleased to have all of you in attendance today, and without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to our expert, Judy.
Yes, thank you, Blake. Thank you very much. And to those of you that have joined us previously, welcome back. To those of you that are joining us for the first time, we welcome you and thank you for attending. I'd like to begin by giving you a little bit of information about who we are at Insala. What we do is that we offer solutions to organizations, and we concentrate on areas around career development, career transition, mentoring, and alumni. And what we do is we offer consulting, we offer training, and we offer the technology to, keep your programs from becoming an administration nightmare. By offering a total solution, we believe that what we really can offer you as an organization is sustainability, so that your programs are going to be alive and doing well, not just in a year from now, but several years from now. So let's get started. The secret sauce to mentoring in 2015. Here is what we're going to look at today. First of all, to let you know that this information is coming from a survey that was launched in mid-January and went through March, and so we're bringing you that information, and we're going to talk about some of the top trends in the survey data. Talk about, the three biggest takeaways that we found in this information and we feel is going to be important to you. And then also talking about the three biggest gaps that we saw as we were going through this. And again, those areas that we feel are going to be important for you to look at. In addition to that, we're going to talk about in each of the areas, what does this mean for you and how are you going to go forward? And then, as Blake had mentioned, we will have a Q&A session as we go forward. So as we get started, what we want to talk about were, we ask organizations, what are the top two primary objectives of your mentoring program? And of course, you can see there, 49.5% said that it was around leadership development. Now, in addition to that, we saw 48.6% at skill development. In addition to that, and keeping in mind that people could choose more than one in doing that, but what we also found out in some of the comments that when it came to skill development, that, this had to do with leadership skills as well as any kind of technical skills. There was a recent ATD study that was done that really talked about the fact that the skills gap is no joke. The study showed that nearly 84% of the respondents to this ATD study said there was a skill gap in their organization. they concluded it by saying, there's liable one in yours also. So, look at what we've got here, 49.5% leadership and high potential, 48.6% skill development, and building the talent pipeline, which actually goes with those top two. So again, these are the kind of things that we were seeing. Now, in addition to that, we ask individuals, what are the top two matching criteria in your organization? And again, remember, we talked about, the top two objectives were around leadership development and skill development. So this kind of shows that here, that we're seeing there, that we've got 74.7% had to do with skills and competencies in doing that. I mean, we're still seeing a pattern that's going on here. This was, by far the most frequent matching criteria in doing this and taking this forward. Now, we talked about success measurements. Now, one of the things that asking individuals, how do you measure success? And I also have to mention that whenever we do a webinar or whenever we talk with organizations and we talk about looking at what is the hardest thing for you to do in your mentoring program, measuring success is the one thing that came up. This was interesting at that 75.4%, measuring success in feedback surveys. And I want to talk about that because, first of all, we believe that mentoring is a business strategy. This is not just a warm, fuzzy, feel-good program. Mentoring is a business strategy, and if you've got a business strategy, you want to be able to measure it in what you're doing. So one of the things that gets to be very important is in your measurements, you're looking at quality and quantity. Now, many feedback surveys look at quality. How did people feel about it? Did they like the program? Did they like the matches? All of these types of things that were interesting. Now, the other thing that we want to look at, though, is what is the quantity? So you need to be able to measure exactly what's our return on investment for this program and in what we're going through. So in looking at that, you want to be able to look at quality and quantity. Now, one of the other things that I think is interesting when you look at all of this data is, then the participant movement within the organization. There's almost a 50% gap between feedback surveys and looking at participant work within, or participant movement within the organization.
Hi, Judy.
So,
it looks like we've lost the visual connection. Can you share your screen again?
Okay. Can you see it now?
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, sounds like it's working.
Okay, yeah. Okay, okay, let's go back where we were. Looking, there's almost a 50% gap between the feedback surveys that people were using to measure success and participant movement. One of the things that I want to bring up about this participant movement, actually we were with a client the first part of this year, and one of the things that we were taking them through is some training that we were doing and so on, and actually they were on their fourth phase of their mentoring process and in what they were doing. And what we were hearing from individuals is the fact that someone came in, they had just run a report before we started the kind of joint training session we were doing, and came in and said that they had had over 68 individuals that had moved to other positions within the organization. Now, I didn't say promotion. Because one of the things that we do talk about in our mentoring programs is it's got to be very clear this is not tied to promotion. One of those historical misperceptions about mentoring is that it was tied to promotion. We believe mentoring should be tied to development. And then if that development helps an individual then to be able to move to more complex assignments or other projects or so on, that's great. But it should not be tied to promotion in doing that. But in this particular situation, 68 individuals had moved to other positions, and what's really great about that is that these are individuals that might have left the organization because, you know, they wanted to be able to get some movement within, and the mentoring program was what allowed them to do that in taking that forward. Now, we were talking about the terms of looking at quality, which you get in your feedback, and quantity, which is your return on investment. Now, if you look at this area of activity reports with your software, number of meetings, number of participants enrolled, this is really where your software, whatever it is you may be using, your technology tool, can really help to give you that return on investment as we go. That's that quantitative in what we were doing in taking forward. I'm going to do a check here just a moment. Okay.
Judy, can you try refreshing the
Blake,
screen
I'm going to
again?
assume that you still got my screen.
I actually can't see yours anymore. Can you try refreshing it? Looks like we're having some kind of webinar.
It says people can see your screen. Okay, we're going to stop.
See if you can restart.
It's saying that the clean screen, I've got to go back and take that off. The clean screen was overwriting, so I'm going to take that off screen. Is that working?
Still not seeing it. Let's see, what slide did you just leave off from? Maybe I can try.
Success measurements, how do you measure success? We apologize for this, not quite sure what's going on here.
Okay, let's see.
Could you kind of quickly send a chat in if you cannot see the screens? Should be you should be on something that says how do you measure success?
Yeah, it looks mixed.
Okay.
Judy, I'm going to try to share it, and we'll see if we get any better results there. It could be a connection issue.
Okay.
And was this the slide we were on?
That's the one you were on. See if that helps. So some people were getting it, some were not. So.
Okay, it looks like some people are having more success now.
All right. Okay.
Okay, great. And just cue me when we need to move the slide forward.
All right. I can cue you now. Let's go forward to the biggest challenges.
Great.
And what you're doing. Okay. All right. Now what I need to do is, excuse me here, I need to get back to my screen so I know where we're going. Okay. All right. So the next screen that we are looking at is biggest challenges. And what we talked about there is what were the top 3 aspects of your mentoring program that you would most like to change or improve. And, you know, success metrics, here they are again. And what they were doing and the evaluation process of going forward. Level of engagement and enthusiasm and alignment with organizational and talent strategy and communication and training. So it's kind of interesting, you know, again, success metrics being the very, very top of what it's doing, a big gap between, you know, that and level of participant engagement. And as I mentioned before, this is something that we always have a question on. How do you measure? How do you do that and going forward? Now, the other one that I did think was interesting, though, was that level of engagement, alignment with organizational or talent strategy, communication, and training. I would say that if you did alignment with organizational and talent strategy, had communication, a way for mentors and mentees to communicate, and provided training, that alone is going to help with your level of engagement and enthusiasm in what you're doing. But again, we always know training. So Blake, if you'll go to the next slide. Now, our top 3 takeaways from this data were, number 1, there's a huge tendency to emphasize skills and skill development at the start of the mentoring program. And you'll remember that when they talked about leadership development, and then underneath that have to be skills development. And what we know in talking to the organization, that many times the skills development that they're talking about is around leadership skills or more soft skills in what they're doing and taking that forward. The second takeaway we had was a qualitative measurement. And again, we saw a lot of this information, that feedback surveys and that qualitative measurement was far more prevalent than quantitative measurement in what they were doing, in being able to go forward to find out, did people actually acquire the learning that they were looking for in doing that. And then the third top takeaway was, it's hard to get a meaningful measurement and evaluation. This was a common struggle in what people were looking for and how they were going to be moving forward in doing that. So those were the 3 big takeaways that we found in this survey data. Now, the 3 big gaps in the next slide that we found were, the 3 main gaps were, number 1, quantitative measurements. It always comes up. And you've got to start thinking in terms of not just qualitative measurements, but quantitative measurements. I can tell you, I've been doing this for, over 25 years than doing this, and worked with organizations throughout the world in just about every industry that you can think of. And if you want sustainability with your program, you've got to look at these quantitative measurements. You've got to be able to position it as a business strategy, and if it's positioned as a business strategy, then you know that you want to be able to have a quantitative return on investment type of measurement. So again, we weren't surprised when we saw this. The second main gap that we saw was what steps to take to measure and evaluate. And these have got to be defined from the very beginning and taken throughout the entire program. And again, we talked about, some of the things that you need to do in doing that. And then the third main gap that we saw was, there can be no real follow-through on skill development without some meaningful measurement. It will just be a way of individuals saying it was nice in doing this. So on the next slide, what does this all mean for you as you're going forward in doing that? So on the next slide, we're going to talk about what this means for you and the steps you want to be able to take to ensure that you can measure, that you can look at good, solid results from your program. The very first thing that we always talk about is you've got to be able to define clear business objectives. If you've got these, it's a whole lot easier to get your measurements in place. Part of what we talk about is that you should always tie your mentoring program to a clear business objective. If this is a business strategy, tie it to a clear business objective that is sitting there, not just a wish list of, well, we'd like to have better developed individuals. It's a nice wish, it's not a clear business objective in doing that. So make sure that you have defined that first, and then if you've done that, it's going to be a lot easier to identify your measurements for the organization, for the mentors, and the mentee. Now on the next slide, the second thing that we suggest you do is make sure you plan up front, especially when it comes to your success measurements. We have a program that we call MORE, which is Mentoring, Organizational Readiness, and Effectiveness. And, one of the things that we hear many times from organizations is they either get pressure from senior management or not quite sure what to do, and they just jump into the program. There's not a real strategic plan as to how to implement this program up front. And what we have found is that when organizations don't have a good solid plan, in what they're doing and a strategic rollout of exactly what's going to take place, what we find out is the program has no sustainability. And what happens is you might get through that first year, but then when it's going to be repeating and going forward, then there's no sustainability in doing that. It's a little bit what I always say, the difference between ready, fire, aim, and ready, aim, fire. So make sure you've got that plan up front in what you're doing. Now on the next slide, what we see is number 3, engage everybody from the beginning. Don't assume that everybody understands, your mentors, your mentees, your managers, that everybody understands what their role is and what they should be doing. One of the things that we talk about when we talk about mentoring is, the good news about mentoring is it's thousands of years old. And the bad news about mentoring is it's thousands of years old. And the reason we say that is because there are so many different historical perceptions and misperceptions around mentoring. I just actually went through this a couple of weeks ago. I was working with an organization and we were in this room and everybody that was in that room thought they understood what it was going to be a mentor. Only when questions came up and individuals were saying, I thought this was just supposed to be conversations with somebody about the best way to plan their career. I didn't know it was anything about, help or do anything like that. So it's amazing how many different perceptions exist and misperceptions around mentoring. So make sure that through things like role profiles and almost like a job description and training, that everybody, the mentors and the mentees, are very clear on exactly what their role is and what is expected of them. One of the other areas that we find many times is organizations will train mentors and they'll train mentees and they forget about the managers. They forget about the managers of the individuals that are going to be participating. And you've got to have their support. They need to understand what's going on. They need to understand what's happening to individuals who are now working with someone that reports to them. So whatever you do, don't forget to provide information to the managers so they understand their role, and also provide them with training in what they're doing. So again, make sure everybody is engaged from the very beginning. Now, on the next slide, number 4, we suggest you establish check-in points. And it says and or there, I'd say and a communication plan. Once you've got everybody engaged, make sure you can keep them there. As you will remember, one of the concerns that people had brought up around the challenges had to do with the level of participant engagement and enthusiasm. That came up as 35.0% in doing that. So that was one of those areas. What we find is when organizations roll out a mentoring program, everything starts with a bang. There's an information program, there's individuals that, really get started, and there's lots of, hype and kickoff and everything that's going on, and then it gets dropped. Now, because there are so many different and historical perceptions and misperceptions about mentoring, you've got to make sure there's continual check-in points. In fact, we suggest the first check-in point with the mentor-mentee pair is somewhere around 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks after they've kicked off their partnership. And the reason for that is if there's going to be any problems at all, you can get them taken care of right away. Any misperceptions, get them taken care of right away. Make sure there's ongoing check-in points. One of the things we've also found is that for mentoring programs that are, set up for somewhere around 10, 12 months, that about that 7-month, just about that 7-month point, it starts waning, starts going downhill. So you've got to be conscious of these and make sure that you keep everybody engaged. So not only getting them engaged from the beginning, but keeping them engaged in what they're doing. Have those continual check-in points. Don't just have one big hurrah and then let it go. Okay, on the next slide, we're talking about make sure you manage and put your data into practice. This is where your technology comes in. You know, I'd made a comment in the beginning that technology is what keeps your mentoring program from becoming an administrative nightmare in what you're doing. And you know, you really need to be able to track and report whether you have got 20 pairs or 200 pairs in what you're doing. Technology really allows you to be able to track and also report. So it's those reports that help you to visualize what's happening in your mentoring program. And we all know that what's going to happen is once you get your mentoring program up and running and going, somebody's going to want to know, how is it going? What are we getting out of this? You know, quantitative or qualitative. But again, your technology provides you with the ability to track your program and then again report and visualize exactly what's happening in your program and how individuals are paired up and how often they're meeting and how are they doing in measurements to the goals that they want to achieve, and all of these types of indications that your mentoring program is strong and going forward. So again, the kind of a recap of the things that we feel are most important in what you do. Number one, define clear business objectives. 2, plan up front. 3, engage everyone through role descriptions and training. 4, establish your check-in points. And then 5, manage and put your data into practice. So in that next slide, you know, the survey report will be made available in the next month to everyone, and to receive it, just enter your email address in the questions box and we will be glad to send you a copy of the report. And on our last slide, we're looking for any information that you would like to have. Be sure and contact us at mentoringtalent.com or info@insala.com. And at this point in time, Blake, do we have any questions?
Yeah, it looks like we have a couple. We had some interest in examples of the kind of quantitative measurements that'll help us track the success of the program.
Yeah, this is the one that always comes up. And, you know, we can almost count on this on every webinar. How do we measure success? There really are several different ways that you can measure from a quantitative standpoint. And again, you've got to look at it from the beginning. What are your business objectives that you're trying to achieve? And then if you were looking at skill development or even leadership development, what are those things that are tied to the business objectives and leadership development that you want to be able to improve? And so that gives you, you know, kind of one set of measurements. So if those are the things people are going to be working on, then when they put their learning plan and their development plan together, you can be able to track and see exactly have those skills improved. Whether it's leadership skills or whatever it might be, has that improved? Another way that was quantitative I talked about with the organization that had individuals that moved to other parts of the organization. So it was that movement within the organization. Another way we've looked at it is, especially from an onboarding standpoint, is how much faster individuals get up to speed. We've had organizations that normally had anywhere from a 13 to a 16-week, onboarding program, and it was specific, got that down to 6 to 7 weeks. We had another organization, they knew it took approximately 18 months to get these individuals up to speed. What we were able to do is to reduce that to 13 months in doing that. So another way to look at that is, can we decrease that learning curve and increase people getting up to speed faster in what we're doing? And one last way that we have seen this being able to measure mentoring and doing that is organizations knowing and being able to in some ways substitute individuals getting the learning that they needed through a mentoring partnership instead of the cost of a training program. Now, we're by no means saying you get rid of your training programs, but we have learned that if individuals can get the learning that they want in a mentoring partnership, it does save money in doing that. Hopefully that gives you enough examples.
Thanks, Judy. Here's one. Can you provide any examples of good, attainable business objectives that you've seen companies try to establish in mentoring programs?
Yes. Probably, and having to do with leadership development, it's that succession pipeline, probably the business objective being that they want to increase the talent pipeline at specific levels of the organization. Now, what becomes important is you've got to identify the levels of the organization to increase the talent pipeline. You can't just say increase our talent pipeline and go with all levels. You've got to be more distinct. So it's like we want to, as an example, in one organization, we want to be able to increase the talent pipeline, and it was at certain job grade levels. And, I think it was 3 in that one, 3 job grade levels. And then they increase the talent pipeline in 3 other job grade levels. And so be distinct. Most times organizations make it too big. They'll just say we want to increase our talent pipeline, and it's too big to look at, and you're talking about such a myriad of skills that it's unwieldy in being able to do that. So that's one way in looking at that. I would have to say another, and it seems like it's going to be a repeat of the measurement, but another was with an organization. And what they wanted to be able to do was, this was a pharmaceutical company, was get new people up to speed faster in doing that. That was a business objective in being able to do that. And, to make sure that they could get people out in the field better and faster in what they were doing. Another organization that we work with, one of the things we always hear around mentoring is retention, and I caution, absolutely caution, organizations not to try and tie their mentoring program to retention. The reason for that is there's a lot of reasons why people leave an organization. Mentoring cannot touch. But I can tell you that with one area where many times mentoring can be tied to retention is around onboarding. And we have one organization, and they very specifically wanted to be able to tie it to retention of new hires. In doing that, they had run surveys, and they knew that individuals were leaving the organization within the first 12 to 18 months because they were not getting the support. It was an organization that kind of spread out all over. People were feeling like they were, just not getting the support and attention they needed, so they left in doing that. So in that particular case, tying retention of new hires as a business objective worked. But again, I definitely talk to organizations, don't tie mentoring to retention for other reasons, but for new hires, that's good. So hopefully that's 3 good examples you could use.
Great, we're almost out of time. I think we'll have time for one more good question. So we talked about checkpoints on keeping people engaged, especially through different communication practices. How are we supposed to keep everyone engaged throughout the mentoring program? Do you have any specific preferred examples on how that can be done?
You were breaking up a little bit there, Blake, but I think I got it. Talking about some of the best ways to keep people engaged, if I was hearing that correctly. One of the things that I mentioned even during this session was the fact that you need to have some kind of check-in with the mentor and mentee within 6 to 8 weeks after they have started their mentoring partnership. And again, the reason we suggest you do that is because if there's any issues or any problems in the mentoring partnership, you can catch them right away. Or if somebody is kind of going back to old habits of mentoring and not really, doing what they were trained to do and so on, or understood as their job description as a mentor, that you can catch it as quickly as possible in doing that. Then we suggest, and then based on that, and based on your evaluations, you might decide you need to do another evaluation in 4 months. Or you might say, well, things are looking kind of good. I think we're all right. And then, as I'd mentioned before, I definitely would do an evaluation at that 7-month mark for any programs that are running 10 to 12 months. One of the other things that we suggest you do is you're going to take your mentors and mentees and your managers through training, but we all know that you don't retain everything. And so one of the things that we suggest you do, and we do this in our technology, is provide some tips, some reinforcement tips and tools that they can go back to in doing that. And or some very quick lunch and learns, very, very short in what we're doing. We also do things with clients where we take them through what we call very quick email newsletters, very, very short, but they come out once a month or sometimes twice a month. And doing that, it just keeps everything top of mind. And as we were going through this with one organization, and they said, we really like this because it kind of reminds us of all the things that we learned in doing that. So just kind of keep that learning going in what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Judy. Looks like we're about out of time. Judy, do you have any final thoughts for today's webinar?
Again, we absolutely want you to leave your email address and your address in the questions box so that we can send you the survey. It'll be going out formally next month and doing that. And it is very important to make sure that you've got a good strategy and plan. If I was to give you, one best piece of advice, don't just jump in and have your program, but make sure you've got a good, solid strategy and plan. And it is tied to your organizational objectives, and you do measure results, and you do train your participants, and you do track in what you're doing. Because again, you want to look for long-term sustainability in your mentoring program. But other than that, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Thanks again to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you'd like a copy of today's slideshow, you can click a link on it on our Mentoring Thought Leaders Club page on LinkedIn later today. And if you'd like a recording of today's webinar, you can find it on Insala's website at insala.com/webinars. Again, if you have any other questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email us at info@insala.com. And we very much value your feedback on our webinars. So thanks again for coming, and have a great day.